I think I
Okay.
should be able to. Yeah,
Yep.
cool. I think it's starting.
Yeah, I
Um,
guess I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say, do we want to try and kind of formalize a meeting cadence just right off the bat and get that
That
up?
sounds great to me. So, Jason, you've proposed that we essentially pin to the public calendar for the Carpenter Working Group and
Mhm.
do the sort of opportunistic time zone slot per week. Is
Yes.
it biweekly or weekly?
So the working group is bi-weekly. We could do weekly or bi-weekly for this. I think the one thing I'll call out is I won't be able to join the next 2 weeks. I'm going to be away.
Cool.
But after that, weekly or bi-weekly, I think we can kind of play it by ear.
Okay, cool.
Uh,
Maybe we can just shoot for weekly.
okay.
Do we want to default to one time zone or the other, and then on the week where we can, intersect with an actual core working group, we'll just make sure to take the opposite slot, either 9 or 3.
Yeah, that works for me. Or what I had suggested was just alternate like 2 weeks one time zone, 2 weeks the other. Either one works. Whatever you guys would
Oh,
prefer.
okay, cool. 3 is probably slightly more convenient to me, just because there's so many upstream Kubernetes meetings that lean towards the mornings
Okay.
Pacific time to accommodate Europe.
Right. All right. Let's do three then, and then on the weeks that the Carpenter Working Group's at three, we'll do nine.
How does that sound to you, Lima? Cool.
Okay, sounds good. I will get that on our calendar then. Yeah. All right.
Okay, great. Agenda item for consideration, Google Doc for the RFC or whatever
Yes.
collaborative communication medium we want to choose. I mean, I think the default would be to follow the patterns of the Carpenter Core Working Group. Is there any pattern you folks tend to follow in doing a consensus design doc?
I don't think we've actually really done one yet. Generally, it's been one person driving it and then people providing feedback through a PR. Um,
I mean, that
so
works too. If you want to drive it, then we can probably. I just wonder if this is the kind of thing where we would benefit by kind of all converging on the doc in more or less real time.
yeah, no, so I think the way it would end up landing in the repo is like that through a PR. But yeah, I think for getting it through the draft stage, that makes sense to do Google Doc. We can probably just do another, I forget what they're called in Google Docs. Is it like another sheet within the same one as the working group doc, the working group log, or
Yeah,
doc?
like you can actually open up like a tab or something like that. I
Yep.
didn't know about that.
Yeah, I mean that's what we have right now. So like for our different working group logs, we have like four different tabs, one for the main working group and then two for the different issue triage meetings. And then I just made one this morning for this meeting. So yeah, I mean, we probably want to split off into something else if we're making a whole bunch of these docs, but I think for the time being, to just help kind of keep things organized, keeping it in that same doc seems easy enough.
Yeah, plus one for me.
Okay, sounds good.
So let's assume that you won't be able to start this for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
If we were able to make some progress while you're away, would that involve like a deep read of the node overlay? Or is the API sort of more or less in a final state in terms of the proposal?
Yeah, I mean, especially as far as it's going to affect us. Um, I think there's some nuance that's still being worked out in Node Overlay. Like, do we want to have static price adjustments versus dynamic, like percent-based price adjustments, or both? Like, there's stuff like that, but as far as what would affect us in the extension point, I don't think it, I don't think there's much in the air at this point.
Okay, cool. Well, I I think we could probably do that is internalize the current state of the API proposal for node overlay and then start describing where resource slice device metadata would live in that, which would act as the kind of glue to um, being able to project outward from a pending resource claim to a new node that would have a resource slice with the sufficient device capabilities defined in that.
Right.
Super quick, can I get a link to the doc that we wanted to add a new sheet to? I think
Sure.
I think on the issue, um, I don't know if it's supposed to be like how was I supposed to access that? Was that supposed to be on here?
Um, no, so it wouldn't be on there because that's for
Okay, because on the
yeah.
issue, that's what's linked.
Um,
Mhm.
I don't know about the issue. I'd have to take a look at that.
Okay,
This was, I
no
mean, I
worries. I was
made this
just
doc, so um, in the Carpenter, like the Kubernetes SIG Carpenter repo in the README, there's a link to the working group log. I was thinking we just do another document tab inside the working group log doc. So I sent a link in chat as well.
okay.
Um,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, no problem. So yeah, I think yeah, that's definitely a good place to start. And I can also link out to the the DRA RFC. So it isn't merged yet.
Yeah.
I suspect it's very close to merge. And as far as the points that we're going to extend into, it's been relatively static since it was proposed 8, 9 months ago.
Okay,
So
cool. Yeah, and we can, and there's also we wanted to be able just to describe the problem in a really clear, succinct way, so we can probably get most of that done in the next couple of weeks, and then even just having the document structure kind of scaffolded out to
yep,
accelerate the process, and then maybe we can aim for like mid-July presenting a draft to a Carpenter working group meeting and or hoisting that into a PR in the Carpenter Core repo, like in the I don't know, in the July phase. Maybe that's ambitious, but it just gives us something to shoot for.
I mean, I think it's reasonable for like for starting to get like initial feedback and such. Yeah, because early July, well, mid-July probably for sure. So I plan on putting a fair bit of time into this once I am back, um, which is going to be around, I believe, the 6th, or no, the 7th. So yeah, once I am back, this is kind of my top priority in terms of development.
Cool,
So I'll
beautiful.
definitely be able to help assist a ton. Um, and then I think as far as like the MVP we've kind of discussed for the design, like the integration into node overlay, I don't expect there's going to be too much controversial about the design. I think the more interesting thing would end up being those extensions into like how do cloud providers provide their own dynamically resolved uh like resource slices for different instance types.
Yeah.
Then
And it's also going to, there's another, we don't have to go into the details now, but there's going to be another factor where you can imagine a world in which different DRA drivers that can operate on common architecture are going to produce different
right,
metadata. So it's just something we need to think about in terms of the design. We can't assume that uh, a, we need to be able to accommodate that outcome. Like a given resource, like a given instance type may have one or more resource slice representations. So that's something we'll have to consider in the design.
yeah, just depending on which driver happens to be installed on the cluster or installed on that
Yeah.
instance, you could have it with different node selectors.
Is there anything in terms of I can find this out myself, but while I've got you here, is there any boring work we can do to get more recent versions of the kube scheduler libraries into Carpenter, or is that something that is a normal gesture of
Oh,
the maintenance?
we don't actually have any dependency on Kube Scheduler today.
Okay,
It's entirely implemented from scratch.
I see. Okay,
So
so
I would
we
love
can,
us to be able to hook into it, to be clear. I'm not saying we have to re-implement it from scratch. Just
yeah.
for the
So remind me,
schedule.
How does Carpenter guarantee that the kube scheduler is going to be able to schedule in advance? Maybe I have like a cluster autoscaler bias where the flow
We have
there is that we create an entire like simulated representation of the cluster, and then we uh, use the standard kube scheduler libraries to input those representations into what kube schedule will actually do.
I mean, it's more or less similar, except since we're re-implementing it, we have our own conformance tests around scheduling.
I see.
So theoretically, yes, there could be a divergence. I mean, fortunately, Kube Scheduler is relatively static. Obviously, you do have new features like DRA. We do have to add additional features. Like when new fields get added to topology spread constraints, we have to go and add support, add conformance tests. Um,
Okay, got it. So
that
basically,
it
there is going
boils
to be
down
some
to us
like some
optimizing.
basic resource. There's going to be some basic resource slice introspection, not resource slice, resource claim introspection that's going to have to be added to Carpenter's scheduler libraries because that's like in a super hand wavy way the key bits that are in Cube Scheduler that
Yeah,
are going to need to be there in order to because resource claim is it's really you can call it think of it as like a sub property of a pod spec now, and so when Carpenter sees a pending pod, it needs to know to introspect for um, I think it's just called I think there's a new uh, array type called claims, so it needs to
mhm,
know about that and you know do something simple like if this isn't empty, then this is something I need to take into consideration as the reason that this didn't get scheduled. And so I need to make sure that this is a part of the set of scheduling constraints that I'm going to build up to pick the right node that's going to actually fulfill those scheduling constraints.
right. Yeah, and I do think a lot of definitely part of this process will be going through and figuring out how we implement that. Like part of what I think needs to be in the RFC, not like just as an implementation detail, is
Oh
what
yeah,
that
for
flow
sure.
Carpenter
Yeah.
scheduler, how we integrate there. Um, Ideally, I would like to be able to leverage as much as possible from the existing Kube Scheduler Kube Scheduler code.
Yeah.
I know that there is CEL parsing as part of this. I would rather
Yep.
not have to re-implement that.
You definitely don't want to re-implement that. You could
Yeah,
also make a case that you could call that. So DRA is full of a whole bunch of features. So it would be defensible to define an MVP that excluded things like cell expressions because those you can just decide what you want for support for an MVP. Like um, if you just want to like be able to support like numeric representations of devices, that I think that would be a reasonable MVP thing. And then as the momentum grows, we can start potentially adding new contributors to sort of fill out the feature set of DRA over time.
sure. Out of curiosity, though, as an MVP with just numerical representation of devices, does it deliver a lot of value over the existing extended resources mechanism, or is it
That's a
gone?
Yeah, great question. I would say not really. I mean, someone like John from Google would probably be able to interject and say, "Oh, well, there's this." Um, One thing I can think of in particular is, and I was doing this just this morning, an example like sharing a device across multiple containers. So I can reference a resource claim template, or I can create a resource claim template, and then in a pod spec, I can define claims against that template, and um, I can refer to the same template across like more than one container. Or for example, if I had an init container, a use case that I was working on this morning is uh, due to higher failure rates in GPUs compared to CPUs
Mhm.
and the criticality of GPU jobs. It can be some customers want to do something like an NVIDIA SMI or some other like lower level validation as an init container before they actually schedule work on that GPU. And
Right.
so one way to do that would be to schedule a pod with an init container and a container sharing the same, like they're pointed to the same device and in a sort of serial flow. Only if the init container's test validation passes does it progress to the container. But because they're operating in DRA, because they're operating against the common claim, then by the time the actual container does the work, it knows it's been validated against the exact same GPU device, or it's doing work against the GPU device that's been already validated by the init container. So that's an example of something that doesn't need something like cell expression. It doesn't reflect like complex topological constraints, but it's something that I don't think the device plugin can support a use case like that. So there's some simple examples like that.
Yeah, the reason I ask is like if we're putting forward this RFC as Carpenter supports DRA, I do think like we would want to show the additional value you get out of it. And I think, yeah, if we can compile some of the use cases for what this MVP will support and like
Yeah. That's
we'll
totally. We can definitely
definitely
do that in the next couple of weeks. We can define that. I think the point is that's a great call out. I think the point I'm making is just from an engineering practicality point of view. I think it's fair to give ourselves a little mini milestone celebration at some reasonable implementation point, which the bulk of the complexity is not going to be doing these little features, which may or may not correlate to like value adds. It's going to be kind of ripping apart the APIs and putting new things in place. It might be the kube scheduler like work, or all the node overlay evolutions. I mean, including potentially having to sort of, now that if we're going to settle on node overlay, then that is maybe something we actually want to like lean in and help that effort, because that sort of blocks progress of this effort.
Yep.
So I think all that like initial scaffolding is going to represent the bulk of the complexity. And I would just defer to you and other folks in the project, like how, when you want to expose that to customers. Do you want to expose it to customers? Do you want to favor giving folks an example, like a representative example of the sort of foundational APIs early to get them comfortable with it, and also get mileage from the Carpenter project in terms of being able to run conformance tests for those basic functional behaviors? Because even though a lot of them, like if a lot of them are comparable to the existing behaviors, but the code flows are unique. So if I take it from Kubernetes' point of view, you could certainly make an argument that we're not quite at the point, even now in the 134 release cycle, where there's a ton of super compelling things that affect the sort of P50 user.
Mhm.
However, the flexibility promises a whole bunch of things, and the changes required to get there mean that we have to do a whole bunch of fundamental things to the core Kubernetes libraries, and that's super important to get right and to sort of focus on in a concerted effort over like a 2 or 3 or 4 release cycle period. And that's sort of how the Kubernetes project is. The features are kind of rolling in. They're starting to accelerate now, but the last 2 releases have just basically been about settling on a final sort of common API. Because I'm not sure if you're following, there was a different DRA API from like 126 through 131. So 132 brought a more like, this is definitely the structured parameters API we're gonna stick with, and a few more features in 133, and then the main theme of 134 is just going to be reliability in GA. So it's just going to turn on. But in order for that to happen, the Kubernetes has to be super confident that that's a stable surface area, because once you turn on DRA by default in Kubernetes, you don't have to use DRA to be affected by DRA. Like all those code flows are now exposed to every user, whether or not you're using DRA or not, because DRA now just becomes another um, uh, set of the functionality in these super critical Kubernetes features like kubelet and kube scheduler.
Yep. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. And yeah, I do agree. Getting it in early, especially node overlay, we're introducing as a new V1 Alpha 1 API. So being able to get it in those early stages with node overlay It does give us a lot of flexibility in evolving the API based on customer feedback. So yeah, I'm definitely not thinking we need to support like the full set of features of DRA for this initial version, and just getting, but I do think it would be valuable for us to have some like compelling, even if it is just in the future, this is like why we want to be able to support this with Carpenter. Like maybe these aren't
Yeah.
even stories that the MVP will be able to fulfill, but is something aspirational that we're working towards. I think
Yeah. I
we
think,
already
yeah,
have
I
buy-in on
agree.
our side, so maybe it is a little bit performative. Um, but generally, that is what we would expect out of an RFC, and it is something I'd included in an RFC, even if I've already got buy-in from everyone.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, I think part of it is just this is where Kubernetes is going. We want to be Kubernetes compliant, so to speak. And then the other part is explaining why this is unlocking uh, you know, super basically allowing really, really complex topologies that are causing customer pain to be unlocked going forward from that's like the Kubernetes DRA source. We can just copy and paste that over, make it more concise and compelling for the Carpenter customer. And I think, but I agree that's super important and should be like more or less in the first few sentences of the doc.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is the interesting part, that maybe we won't support quite like the full set of features out of the gate, but is those more advanced topology use cases.
Yeah, I mean, Cluster Autoscaler doesn't either. So I think Cluster Autoscaler, because it used the kube scheduler, it had a more of a there was a more of an imperative to like we can't fall behind because this is going to be really bad if we do.
Mhm.
So like part of the cluster autoscaler release process is at the beginning of it's more or less correlated to the Kubernetes release process. So at the beginning, Kubernetes ships a release, and then the norm is that cluster autoscaler kind of takes in all of the libraries from upstream Kubernetes. Any potential evolutions in the API come with those new, dependency consumptions, and then when you have something huge like DRA, you have to sort of do something about it. Otherwise, it's going to make things really bad.
Yeah, yeah. For better or for worse, we don't have that coupling. So
Yeah.
do get a little bit more time to experiment and figure out what the right API surface for us should be. Um, yeah, there is some expectation that we do lag behind on scheduling features by usually a couple of Kubernetes versions.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're going to see any like outstanding community pressure, like you need to get this in quick to be Kubernetes conformant. Though of course we want to be.
I just this is just like tea leaf reading a little bit, but is it fair to say that the community interest in DRA thus far has been keeping track with Kubernetes and less Carpenter customers complaining like I need advanced topological interfaces so I can stop doing all this stuff manually, and DRA brings me that. So you know what I mean? Like a literal kind of like I need DRA because it's actually going to help me kind of thing.
So I think I haven't heard too much directly from our community about DRA. There are some things that like, and I don't know if we're working on a DRA driver from this. There are some AWS devices with advanced topological constraints, specifically like our Neuron devices for
Yeah.
inference. Um, I'm really hoping, like Carpenter currently doesn't work very well with them because they require a custom kube scheduler extension that we don't integrate with. And we've considered taking on the work to do integration with it, but I'm hoping we may be able to model those types of devices with DRA. A little bit aspirational, seeing other problems that could potentially be modeled with DRA that we know we
Yeah.
want to solve, even if they're not currently solved with DRA today.
Well, that makes sense. And that would be a great story. I mean, I know Google's CCC story is just sort of it's a direct input to their strategic investment in DRA. It allows them to uh, try to be competitive in this particular space of like auto scaling in a world of GPU constraints. And so DRA it's a natural fit for us. Um, I say us for Azure.
Sure.
The story that we're focused on is ensuring a great GB200 experience. So that's NVIDIA's new like supercomputer 18 rack CPU platform. And NVIDIA is also a key stakeholder behind DRA. And so GB200 is essentially requires DRA. So it's less of an auto scaling thing for you say 2025. But for yeah, it's not going to be too long before even if the idea that you would get something like a GB200 and auto scale it infinitely, that's a little bit hypothetical at this point because they're so expensive and so rare that most customers who are going to get them are going to turn them on and use every single GPU in them for super high the high speed shared memory capabilities for training. But still, in a carpenter world, one can imagine that being like, give me, I've got the money, I just want to get that GB200 when it arrives, go get it and run this training model and then reap it. So
Yeah.
there's definitely a story there even for GB200, I think.
Well, and we have also heard from users, they don't want to necessarily mix node management solutions. They want to just have one solution. And we've been making investments into making Carpenter useful for like if you have like static capacity requirements, say with, I know we've been looking into say pod headroom. We've
Yeah.
also been looking into, well, not looking into, we shipped support for reserved capacity. Um, so I think this is something that even though we're not hearing a lot about it today, I think it's just because, well, I mean, for us at least, most of our customers are running EKS. EKS 133 just enabled DRA in beta. So
Yeah.
most
Okay, cool.
people, if they're seeing it, they're only just now seeing it. So I imagine even if we're not hearing like loud asks for it now, they will come. It's just a matter
Cool,
of time.
cool. Okay, cool. Once again, the dudes are just talking. Alima, I'm sure you'll have lots of opportunity. So thanks for being willing to dive in here to a new
Yeah,
area.
I'm just taking notes. I'm putting it on the doc. So yeah,
That's awesome.
it's better for me to just take
Oh,
it in.
awesome. Yeah, thanks for filling that out. I meant to be, I'm very bad at remembering to take notes during meetings.
No, it's good. And then I just missed a little bit because for a little bit I didn't have edit access, but then I got it. Yeah, but this bottom one, this DRA thing, this is where we want the RFC.
Yeah, I needed to complete naming that.
Okay. No worries. I was just wondering. In terms of housekeeping, do we also want to um put this information somewhere on the GitHub, either on the issue or somewhere else? Is another place better?
Yeah, I would link to it on the issue.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead and link that out, that'd be great.
Okay,
Uh,
sure.
and then as far as elsewhere where it's linked, this entire doc is linked in our README. Um, yeah, and then we'll also, I'm sure, discuss that working group.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just put this one in the issue. Um, yeah, I think I went to the wrong thing because on the issue it says separately if you're interested.
Which issue are you looking at?
I'm looking at the one I linked earlier, the DRA 1231.
Oh, so that's, oh wait, okay. Now I'm looking.
I think
Okay,
this
I
is
can go ahead and update the actual issue. I imagine
oh yeah,
that
if you have access to
that's,
that, maybe that would be better.
yeah, I can go ahead and update it with the link and just update the main issue page or the main issue post. Or- Oh, you know what? It's actually already linked there. Uh, because we linked out to the log.
Um, when I click the log link though, it's to it's not to the working group log.
Well, that must be an old link. Oh no, that's the actual that's the DRA working group log. Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and update this with all of the details. I'll do it after this meeting, but I'll update it with all the details, like include the calendar link for this meeting once I get that up. Include the link to the log, etc.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Mhm. So yeah, I guess over the next couple of weeks then, yeah, if you all do want to start like trying working on kind of the story for how this is going to look integrated with node overlay, um, and getting in some of those initial user stories, I do think that would be a good place to start. And of course, like feel free to go from there as well. Don't let me hold you back, but I think the next thing would probably be once we have a good idea of what the like end user extension looks like, so that being the extension onto node overlay, or if we want to explore any other options. Uh, Looking at what the extension for the cloud provider API is. So likely how we extend the instance type structs to model these resource slices that can be generated. Because, well, that isn't like part of an end user facing API, that is the API available to the cloud providers. And then I think the thing to go for after that is basically what the actual scheduler integration looks like. Unfortunately, this is something we've been meaning to work on. We don't have good documentation for what Carpenter's scheduler actually looks like today. Like definitely want to create a flow chart for how our scheduler works. But unfortunately today the source code is the only source of truth.
Yeah, we might, I don't know, maybe I'll be brave and pair Lima with like a upstream Kubernetes DRA expert, and we can see how we can get started on that. Because that'll be an interesting bit of work, evolving that Carpenter scheduler to include the claims, knowledge of claims.
Yeah, the scheduler is not too bad of a read until you get into the topology spread and pod affinity, pod anti-affinity
And we should be
code.
able to ignore that. That shouldn't
Yeah.
affect DRA. So yeah,
You
that would
should be
be
able to reason about that
mercifully, we don't have to
completely.
worry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's separated out. So the rest of the scheduler code's not too bad though. It's mostly what you would, I mean, at a very high level, the way Carpenter's scheduler works is we create a node claim template based on a node pool, and we keep trying to add pods to it, constraining the requirements based on pod requirements. Um,
Yeah. So we
so
just
we
need to
can't add
increase
it.
we just need to add the new DRA stuff as part of those pod requirements.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, like right now we're looking at node affinity, resource requests. Now we're just also looking at resource claims. So yeah, I could recommend though too, if you're trying to just get a handle for how the code works as a whole, it might be a little bit better to go look at a slightly older version, like 1.4 maybe or 1.3. The reason I say that is we've done a fair bit of work to multi-thread it, and it's gotten a little bit more challenging to
I
maintain.
see, I see, I see. I can imagine that.
So back on 1.3, it's single threaded. So it doesn't make it that much harder on 1.5, but if you want just a easier read top to bottom, don't have to reason about that control flow. Um, yeah, back on 1.3 is probably the easiest.
It'd probably be easier for like using an LLM to help as well. I'd imagine it'd
Probably.
be easier on the LLM.
I mean,
Like,
for the
what's this
most part,
code doing? Like, I can't tell. It's just a bunch of Go funks. What's
Yeah, well, we're using a lot of work queue parallelize.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not too bad, but made it split some stuff up. So it's a little bit, you have to jump around a little bit more.
Okay, cool. I think we've got a good 2 weeks and more worth of work. So hopefully you're doing something fun with your 2 weeks away.
Yeah, no, I am. So
Is the link at Pesa correct?
uh is that a link in chat or a link in the doc?
Uh, uh, in the chat 1.3.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So yeah, it's if you go in, yeah, I think the file's just called scheduler.go. So that's like the main entry point. There's of course other dependencies that it refs out to, but yeah, if you wanted to get an idea of how the scheduler's flow works, that's the best place to start.
Okay. That sounds good. I'll definitely take a look.
Mhm. But yeah,
Cool. Any last thoughts from anyone?
I don't think so. I guess action items for me, I'll go ahead and get the calendar and such updated. Um, I don't know if do we want to schedule meetings the next 2 weeks? I know Sarv said he may want to attend, but I know he was held up in other meetings today. Um,
Is there a working group meeting next week at 9 a.m.? Is that right?
not. Working
There's
groups
not.
are, there's an
But
issue
that was
tree.
this morning. That's right.
Yeah.
I had a conflict this morning.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
no,
can why don't for the next couple of weeks I'll remember. I think Alima and I can just keep a mental note of Thursdays, and we'll poke folks in the. Actually, there's no. Is there still going to be a Slack next week? I guess it'll just be a disabled Slack. So we should be able to go into like the Carpenter Dev Slack and see if anybody wants to check in as we make progress. I don't know if you've heard, but the Kubernetes Slack is getting de-optimized. So
oh, I was wondering what you meant. No, I hadn't heard about that.
yeah, but I was thinking in my mind like, oh, there is going to be no. Oh no, there's still going to be Slack. It's just going to be the free tier, and so
Yeah.
um, people like me who've been used to this for like 10 years are a little confused what that's actually going to mean.
Right. Is it a migration or just moving over to free tier altogether?
It, yeah, it's the second one. I mean, under the hood, I don't know what it means. It's just a CNCF budget thing. It's
Makes sense. Yeah.
Slack has been offering essentially an enterprise edition for no or little cost, and that time has come to an end apparently.
Got it.
We're actually staying on Slack for free. I thought there's talks about like migrating to Discord or something.
Yeah, that's it's super sudden. I'm glad we're doing this in a recorded session. So sorry for the recording if we're just speculating, but um, my understanding is that the announcement from Slack HQ was so sudden that the Kubernetes leadership didn't have a chance to make a plan yet. So we're going to go to the free tier. I think folks are not exactly sure how inconvenient it'll be. So if it's
Oh,
super inconvenient, then they might scramble to come up with a solution. If it's tolerable, then it might be a few more months in limbo until there's a permanent solution.
yeah.
Okay.
Also smaller question for your teams, is there a way to import Google Calendar? Like or I don't know how you keep track of all the Google Calendar meeting invites on your teams. This is more of a question for Jack, but
I can
I
tell you.
use it on my personal calendar.
okay. Okay. I was just curious
Yeah.
because I'm like using both and ideally I just want to use Teams just
Mm.
because it's on my laptop. But
Yeah, I have the corporate. For me, it's not great, but just this what works for me. I've got the corporate stuff in the corporate apps, and then all of the public open source stuff is essentially mixed in with my personal. So like I read Gmail all day long.
mm,
99% of it is like, GitHub notifications.
okay.
Once in a while I'll hear from long lost family member or something in the same thread. So I just have to learn how to deal with that. But my life's been taken over with open source stuff, so
Uh-huh.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess so. In that case, I'll start the calendar invites on. I believe. Pulling up my
July 4th holiday, maybe something like that.
July 10th, I think.
I was just thinking we're all going to be away for, I don't know when the July 4th is this week. Okay, this year it's a Friday, so that means we'll be back the week of the 7th, I think.
Yeah. So July 10th is that Thursday. So probably start the recurring meeting then.
Sounds great.
Okay, sounds good. Then I'll also go ahead and update that GitHub issue. Yeah, please feel free to poke me if you have questions on Slack. I may not be able to respond immediately, but I will when I'm able.
If you're going to have fun, Jason, we're not going to do that. We're going to let
Don't
you
worry
have
about it.
your
I'll respond.
vacation.
Like I said, I'll respond when I'm able. I won't feel
Okay,
pressured.
cool.
So
Also, Kubernetes, the Slack might go away, so it's all good.
true. I guess we'll see how that falls out. All right, sounds good. Thank you
Okay,
all.
thanks everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.